welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is our parent support group themed on talking all things transitions. I'm Ellen. I'm the events coordinator at Look. I'm actually not now. I just realised I given my old job title. My role's changed a couple of months ago and I need to get out of the habit of saying that, but I think you all know me. If you haven't been to one of our parent support groups before, we are doing things a little bit differently tonight because we are having a themed session. So we have presentations from Vicky and Jane and two of our fantastic Look mentors, Liam and Bryony, to start with. So they'll be kind of giving a bit of a presentation and talking to you a bit about their experiences for the first half. So after that point, we will then have time for questions. So just hold on to your questions until we finish the presentations, and then we'll have a lot of time to chat afterwards. Just to let you know, I'll just go through a couple of housekeeping things. So we are recording the session to comply with our safeguarding policy, and we may edit parts of that recording to make into a resource afterwards. So what we think we're going to do is edit the presentations from the speakers to make available for people to listen back to afterwards. So it will just be those sections and not the Q&A section. You will have signed up, read our code of conduct when you were signing up for the session, so please be mindful of that and just to use respectful language. And just to make sure that everyone can hear each other as best as possible, please stay muted if you're not speaking. You should be able to unmute yourself, but just if you've got a lot of background noise, then please stay muted if you can. When you do want to add something to the conversation or ask a question, you can raise your hand. So that's under reactions, or if you're using keyboard shortcuts, that's Alt-Y or Option-Y. Or you can also use the chat. So the chat feature on Zoom, there's a text box to type in there. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and passing any questions on to Jane. So feel free to use that as well during the session, and we will be keeping an eye on things there. I think that's all we have in terms of housekeeping. So I'm going to hand you over now to Jane to start with our discussion.
Thank you for coming, and hopefully this will be useful. I know that I could have done with this session when my daughter was actually from when she was about year 4, because I was quite scared of the next stage already. So yeah, this is why I've put this together, but also I think Vicky's got similar experiences. Both of our children have transferred to secondary quite recently, but we've also got Liam and Bryony, and they've kind of come out the whole education system, so they've got experiences all the way through. So it's really good that they're here to talk to us later. So I have got something to share with you. This is Transition, a survival guide for parent carers of visually impaired young people. So you can see on the slide my beautiful daughter at 3 years old, and I'm holding on quite tightly, and she's about to go to her first day at nursery school. And then the other picture is her on her first day at secondary school, just so different. And as you can see, I'm no longer holding her because it was such a big step. I was in the background, but it's very different. And I think that's the thing. I think change is really, really hard for our children, but really hard for us as well, kind of trusting other people, trusting the people that are going to be with them, and trusting that they will be safe. And what I really know is that the preparation to the different stages is as important to us as parents as it is to our young people. When Chloe was going to do her sessions, so she had transition days and she had orientation and mobility sessions, and I think her orientation mobility officer picked up that I was a bit anxious and invited me to visit the secondary school with Chloe when she was having a session with her. And she got her timetabled, her braille timetable, and she said to Chloe, okay, you've got science next, show us where you're going to go. And Chloe, with her amazing mapping skills and the session she'd had previously, just went from class to class, and it was the most reassuring thing, and it showed me that she was ready, and it did make a huge difference to me as well. So that was the first thing that I wanted to share with you, but also the understanding the expectations of the school. For anybody whose child is about to go to secondary, the relationship you have as a parent is so different at secondary school, and it doesn't mean that you can't communicate with them, but the bigger schools, they got so many people involved, and it's really important to know beforehand how they expect you to communicate with them, because it's very different. So I had to use every ounce of patience, calm, and all my communication skills, and change them a bit actually, for secondary. But she's in year 8 and it is getting better, and I think I had to lower my expectations in a way. I realized it couldn't be the same relationship as it was before, and remember to breathe, because we're as anxious probably as the young people that are going up, and actually they're everything, they pick it up. So I know that I would drop her off and then I'd go for a long walk afterwards if I wasn't working, because I just needed to kind of just stay calm, and they do get through it. So these are my top tips. So to plan and practice routes and routines for your young people. So Chloe had a really good active orientation mobility officer who actually in the summer term picked Chloe up every couple of weeks, took her on the bus, practiced the bus route with her, practiced crossing the road safely, and then did the routes around school, as I said. And it meant that she knew, like I've said, where she was going by the time she got there. And one of the best, and when I realized it was a success, was when she showed other year 7s where they needed to go. I was like, that's how it should be. So yeah, the support from VI professionals is so key. So our qualified teacher for the visually impaired obviously liaised lots about equipment and making sure that everything was in place for Chloe at the school, and the orientation mobility officer was really, really hands-on too. And actually they turned up on the inset days before Chloe started. Chloe came to the school just to have one last look round and check that she was comfortable before school started the next day, but they turned up and it was brilliant, because they did lots of troubleshooting, which we hadn't expected. So that their involvement is key. The training for staff and students is absolutely essential as well, because there's suddenly so many more staff involved with your children. So for them to understand their needs, their access needs, how they work is so key. And also students understanding, yeah, it makes all the difference. One of our mentors said that the transition days is not just the normal ones. Go as much as you can, which I would absolutely agree with. And Chloe's school did a summer school, which we were away for, but I know that would have helped as well, just as many times as they can go to the new place to make it familiar. Have as many meetings with the school as is necessary without putting them off you, because they're used to the young people being much more independent. It is a big balance. But having said that, Chloe went on a residential very soon after she started secondary, and we had 3 or 4 meetings about that, because it was such a key thing to get right. And it was a success, and I was really grateful that the school and the person organising it said, yeah, we know this is important. So they met me, which was great, and her team, all of her team. Keep lines of communication open with your child as much as possible, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? Our children cope with a lot of things, but it's very hard when things maybe are a bit tricky. So even if they're not able to talk about it, kind of just be there, and you'll know if things aren't quite right as well. So, trust your parenting. arrange team around the child or family meetings. They're called different things at different local authorities, to iron out any teething problems. And we had 3 in the first year, kind of, and then I know COVID struck, but it is really key, because then you can meet with the team, you can check that the Senko is doing what they need to do, that everything's right, and that people are not missing things. So that's really key. And trust that the school want to make it work. Often, it depends what setting they're going to, but often they might be the first child in the school, or probably the first one with the different things that they're presenting. So they might make it, it might not always look exactly right, but they do want to make it work, and that's what I realised. So this is Vicky's slide. So Vicky, do you want to talk through this bit for me?
Yeah, not a problem. So making sure all equipment is in suit and working, enabled for smooth start. So everything from primary school, your embossers, your Zarken machines, whatever equipment that you use, make sure that it's all signed off from counter to be moved to the high school with enough time for everything to be ready. A designated support room for equipment preparation and downtime. We've noticed that we needed quite a lot of room because there's quite a lot of equipment, because Emily's a brailleist, so we needed embossers, laptops, computers. We've got it all basically. So they needed somewhere to work from as well. But we've also noticed that downtime's quite a big thing in high school. You don't realise how tired they get. So having a room to go to just to have 5 minutes quiet or go to the room to do a lesson was what we needed. All teachers trained and have the timetable ready before start of the school year, awareness for the whole school. Like Jane said, teacher training is a must. To this day, we're coming to the end of year 7 now, and we're still having problems with teachers not following the structure that we put in place, even after training. And then you've got a continuation of teachers leaving, new teachers coming in. They need to be on top of teacher training. It's a must for everybody. And so the whole school, Emily very bravely did a video of herself using a bit of a braille equipment and telling people who she is and what she is, and if they see her in the corridor, to say hello and say, oh, it's so and so speaking to you, hello Emily, it's Miss whoever, just so that, and that was showed to the whole of the year 7 group. So they was all made aware, and now it's eventually been shown to the whole school. So people are more aware of her walking around the corridors when she's off doing a job or she's off walking around going to dinner. QTVIs and habilitation timetable of support to be in place is another essential. They need to know where they're going. They need to know what days they're coming in, what they're going to work on. Environmental audit is normally done by counter. That is a must again, to make sure that there's no obstacles in the way, or if anything needs changing, bits of ripped up carpet that might need taking down, that all needs to be done in the environmental audit. We had trouble with ours because our transition come in COVID, so a lot of our planning didn't go to plan. So it ended up that our habilitation officer did the environmental audit, and we're still waiting for things to be done. Get to know new TAs. Another thing, sometimes you might have 1 TA, sometimes you might have 2, but get to know them and let your child get to know them. Have as many meetings as you think you need. Ordering of resources. Obviously, we've talked about this in other groups, in our groups in the past. There is places where you can order resources from, textbooks and stuff that can be pre-ordered to make sure that they're ready and in school. And just having lots of meetings to work out anything that needs working out between new TAs, old TAs, a lot of liaising with primary staff to make sure that everything's ready and they understand the child's needs. And I think, and the other thing that we did was we made a transition requirement form so that can be shared and updated as things go on. So everything that we planned, we'd make a list on who was to do it and when it was to be done by. So then when things got done, you could tick it off and move on, or you could share it and say, this hasn't been done yet, where we're going with it. So that's my top tips for transition.
Thank you, Vicky. I realise I didn't, for those who don't know us, so Chloe's now 13 and is in year 8, but it's been a very up and down time anyway, because she'd started in year 7 and then kind of had a term. It went, and the first term everyone was very nice and she was quite confident, but I think was struggling but couldn't quite articulate it. And then the second term was much trickier, and then we went into lockdown, so it was that's not ideal, but she has survived and she's still going in and she's amazing, resilient, and I've learned a lot through the whole process, but what I wish I'd known are things like how different my relationship would be with the school. I mean, with the primary school, it was really open. Obviously, it was one teacher, and sometimes I had teachers that didn't get Chloe as much, but the Senko would always try and intervene. And the school worked so hard to include her and to make sure she had a really positive experience all the time. But it was a much smaller school, and their ethos was kind of inclusion. So things like sports day were kind of accessible for Chloe, which made everything else for the other children accessible, if that makes sense. So, but it's not like that at secondary, and I think it took me a long time to understand that, and I wish I'd been more prepared, because I'm just so open, and I just thought I'd be able to have meetings all the time. And initially they were very patient, and then it was obvious that they just they wanted to get on with Chloe being their student, and it was really interesting. Assumptions would be made. I was told that, she's like any other 11-year-old, she's going to struggle with socializing, and it took a while between me and the support staff to say, no, but Chloe's visually impaired, she's also hearing impaired, the social side needs a lot more work and support. And I think I'm getting there, but she's now in year 8, so it's taken a while for that education to filter and to be understood, but it is happening, so which gives you hope. The tiredness I had no idea about. Jack, who has written in one of the mentors, said that at primary school he'd get home and do his homework straight away, but he needed time at secondary afterwards before he got on with it. And I just think there's so much noise, or the navigating of corridors, there's things that you can't imagine, and they do cope, but they are incredibly tired. And Chloe needs a quiet space at school now as well, as Vicky mentioned. But the exciting things as well is that Chloe's imagination, her interest in learning has been completely sparked by all these other subjects, and that's really exciting. And it's often the different teachers. She loves history, she loves English, and that's because the teachers, the depth of knowledge they have, and that they're bringing the subjects to light for her, so that's really good. The second term is where there might be wobbles. I think it's just because the social side of things changes in the second term, and I don't really quite understand it because I'm not an 11-year-old child anymore, but I know that I really needed to catch her in that term. So it's just good to be aware, and maybe make sure you have those meetings in the first, second and third term at least, when they've transitioned. And the key staff are absolutely incredible. Chloe has found people that champion her and say, no, I want to teach Chloe next year because I don't want her to have to start again. And they make relationships with her, and then they want to keep her teaching her, and that's brilliant. It's so rewarding. that whatever goes wrong can usually be fixed. I think it feels so hard, doesn't it? That whole, I look at my little girl going off to nursery and then the secondary, and it feels much more like a lion's den. But actually, people do want to make it work, and you might have to do that calm and patience and be understanding to a certain point before you actually go, no, it's not okay. But things usually can be fixed. And the one thing I wish I'd known is that my child would survive, that as scary and as hard it is for us, they are actually tough beings and they will survive. So yes, so we're going to go on to the mentals now. So I'm going to stop sharing because actually we want to hear from Liam and Bryony about their experiences. So thank you for listening for this bit. And I think Liam is going to talk about his experience first. Hi, Liam.
Sure. Hello.
Tell us all about you.
Sure, I will do. Okay, so my name's Liam. So I've got nystagmus, so I've got some useful vision. Not a great amount of vision, but I'm registered partially sighted. So that's me. I'm 26, so I finished school about 8 years ago. So I went to the same school for 7 years. So I did the first 5 years, then I did 2 years at sixth form. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit about my transition from primary school to secondary school, the sort of transitions that happened during secondary school, and also a little bit about going into sixth form, and then I'll briefly touch on what I'm doing now. So what I would say really, it's my experience from primary school to secondary school was relatively smooth. It had some challenges. So I know we had a couple of meetings with the school whilst I was still in primary school. So I was taken on trips up there sort of during my last summer term in year 6. So I sort of got to know the TAs, like the support, the sort of disability support network. So they had sort of a specialist unit, probably about 15, 20 staff members, most of them TAs. So I got to meet them, got to sort of build a relationship with them before I went to secondary school. So I sort of got to also know the main area where the support block was, so I knew where to go if I had trouble throughout the school day. So they were really good in that sense. So obviously the summer holiday came and went, which was quite nerve-wracking for me, really. I wasn't so nervous about making friends or the lessons themselves. My biggest worry was learning the routes, to be honest with you, like, because obviously it's primary school, you're always in one classroom 90% of the time. Whereas when I moved to secondary school, my school was quite big, so it's 1,800 students, and it wasn't just one building. It was in the town centre, and there was one building, and then there was another building, sort of completely separate. So you had to walk across this town centre to get to it. Now I know my mum was quite anxious about that, so which obviously made me anxious as well. So one thing I would say about that is, obviously it'll be a nerve-wracking time for yourselves and for your children, but try and stay positive, because if you're anxious, your children will pick up on that. So accept there's going to be challenges, and obviously there will be tough times, but definitely try and stay positive for your child, because if you sort of give the impression that maybe you're not sure if your child can survive at secondary school, then they're going to pick up on that and they're going to doubt themselves as well. So stay positive, accept there's going to be challenges, be realistic, there's always going to be challenges, especially for visually impaired people, but try and stay positive and accept things might go wrong, and it's not the end of the world. So for example, when I did start, like I said, moving around, finding classrooms was difficult to begin with. And to be honest with you, it took me some time. So I left lessons a couple of minutes early just to avoid the rushes, so I could get to my other lessons safely, which was really, really helpful for me. So I wasn't too worried about the bigger children at the time, because obviously you're tiny when you're 11 compared to a 16-year-old who's shut up. And that really helped. But also I lost a few pens and pencils and stationery, and I left my blazer in a couple of classrooms and that. And people lose things. Just making sure you've got backups for equipment, I think is crucial, really. And if your child does lose something, you know, don't be too hard on them. Just say, yeah, it's gone wrong, but, you know, learn from it. What can you do differently? That sort of thing. I think that's really helpful. One thing I did to make sure I didn't lose any books, which I think is the one thing you really want to make sure you don't lose, is I carry around a folder with me, or if obviously you've got a laptop, you've got a case with you as well. So just keep everything in one place, so you know you have to look after this. And yeah, I agree with what was said earlier. Basically, the first term is great because everyone's really nice, and it's not so much about the learning in the first term, it's about the integration into secondary school. And it's quite a pleasant environment because everyone's really friendly. The friendship groups haven't really formed yet, so everyone speaks to everyone. And then I think when you get into the second term, I think sometimes you might be part of one friendship group but not part of another. So sometimes I think integrating and speaking to a wider group of people does become more difficult in maybe the second term in your first year and going into the third term as well and beyond. So I do agree actually that maybe the second term can be a bit more difficult, but it's not. But again, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that can be overcome. Also, as you go through the years, I think the next big transition is obviously you grow up, and that has its challenges. But also when you learn your subjects and you have the support for those subjects and you have your teachers, you then pick your options for your GCSEs, which can be another thing to sort of consider. So when you're picking your options, you want to make sure that your child can do the subject. So for example, you want a visually impaired person to do any subject, but also you have to be practical. So I sort of picked geography, history and business studies. So business studies and history was great, but geography was quite difficult with the pictures. So I got enlarged pictures for that, and so I could view pictures and view diagrams. So that was great. And, but again, it's a transition, but it's also a transition that I think is something that any visually impaired person, given the right support, can deal with. Going into sixth form as well, it was another transition that I had to deal with. And I seem to feel like I got more confident throughout the years. So I start to need less and less support, because you know the school by then. You get bigger. You're suddenly the biggest child in the school, compared to being the smallest. So yeah, I honestly just think it's a case of be positive, sort of show your child that you can sort of believe that they can deal with secondary school life. And yeah, so there will be challenges, but it can work, if I'm being completely honest. And the last thing I will say is after school, I got decent A levels and decent GCSEs, and now I'm working for the council, sort of in compliance and safeguarding. So it does work out in the end. There are challenges, but visually impaired people with the right support, they can go into a wide range of roles and they can lead very successful, sort of have a very successful education and a very successful career. So positivity, there will be challenges, but it can be something that your child will get through. Okay.
Thank you.
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. There will be time for questioning because I'm sure you have got lots of questions, but now I'd just like to hear from Bryony. You've been very patient, Bryony. Thank you.
I've enjoyed listening. I'm too nervous. It's finally I'm going first. So I'm registered blind. I have no useful vision at all, but I did have at school.
I had a condition called juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which can cause uveitis and glaucoma in children, or it can go into your organs. So mine went into my eyes. So although I was visually impaired, I still had quite a lot of vision, just struggled in the dark. Quite a lot of hospital appointments in primary school. So quite a lot of the first, like up to year 4 was quite missed. Quite a lot of hospital stays for 6 weeks onwards. And I did mainstream up until year 4. And then my mum decided that I needed a bit of time because my reading was rubbish and I was just struggling. So I went to a special needs school in Manchester, and I was taught everything. Like, my confidence was amazing. I did that from year 4 and 5, and then my mum wanted me to go back into mainstream because I was going to a mainstream secondary school. So I did year 6 in primary school in mainstream, which probably was the best for me because I then went on to secondary school with my bunch of friends that I'd made in primary school. We looked at other possibilities, maybe St Vincent's is a special needs school, but my mum didn't kind of want me to go through that, and I didn't feel comfortable. I wanted to be like, back then, like a normal school, and I wanted to be like my friends. So leaving primary school, I remember we had quite a few orientation visits, but we only ever did them when nobody was there, and I think it would have been better to have them when people were there as well, because it's very different navigating through a building when there's nobody there to when there's hundreds of bigger people there. Then I had quite a good secondary school experience. I enjoyed it. I picked subjects that were quite challenging. Technology was very different when I went to school, so everything was still kind of written down on blackboards, and I used to have to photocopy my own stuff. I think things have very much changed, and I think it's a better time to go to school if you're visually impaired now. But what else was I going to say? I remember my mum was more worried than I was about going to school because I had my best friend and I knew my best friend was coming. But then when we got to school, we were in different forms. So then that was obviously caused a lot of anxiety because I wasn't with the people that I knew anymore. But just have faith in your children and know that they will make friends. They'll be different friends than they went to school with, but that's all part of it. And then, yeah, like Liam said, don't try and rub your anxiety off on your children because they will feel it. And I remember finding out years later that my mum followed me in the car all the way to school for the first week, and I didn't know about it. So if you're going to do it, you're going to be anxious, and just be a bit sneaky about it and don't let them know. I then went on to mainstream. I did quite well in my GCSEs. I think I would have done better. I passed them all, but I think I would have done better in like a special needs school because I think things would have been a lot easier, but I don't think I'd have been the person I am if I hadn't at least tried mainstream. Then I went on to mainstream college, found that really too hard, and that's when I discovered RNC. Went there and did my A levels and then went on to uni. I'm a qualified counsellor, but now I'm on another pathway because I'm a mum and my baby's just like progressed from reception to year 1. So I've got all the parent anxieties of the same with, but he's fully sighted. So I'm coming in as a blind mum, like trying to get the same kind of stuff like for him, but I need accessibility stuff with him, and school are not kind of understanding that. And through lockdown, it was very difficult. They were sending stuff like on Teams and I couldn't access it. But primary school is a bit more helpful. So, but yeah, so I have the same anxieties now as a mum, even though it's the other way around. So that's my story.
Brilliant, Bryony, thank you. And actually some really good points. So I am just going to share again because Jack, who is, I think this is right, Ellen, he's totally blind. He's a primary school teacher, and he couldn't come tonight, but he wanted to share some of his thoughts as well. So there you go. So I'm just talking to myself. So I asked him these questions, so hopefully you'll find them useful. What helped you make change between educational settings? The days, and I think we've all said that as well, that that it's just so important, but also really importantly, as Bryony said, make sure that there are people there when you're doing the orientation and logistics, because it's so different. And knowing routines, actually, I know that Chloe and I practiced what she was going to do. We didn't get very far on the buses because then COVID struck, but we were taking her on the bus and going with her. Hopefully then eventually she was going to go on her own, but that hasn't happened. But it was really helpful on the lead up to, because we'd practiced loads. I'd practiced how I was going to take her and pick her up, and the getting stuck in is really key as well. I know Chloe's a lot more settled this term, and she's joined the drama club, so it's a really good hint. So what can parents do to support their children? Just being there when you need them without being too anxious. So I'm sure we can all do that. And I love this point, letting you off for things like forgetting your kit bag for the first term or two. And I think that's so key. You kind of want your child to be independent. You know that they should be doing these things on their own now, but actually they have got so much to remember. So being that nice mum and dashing into school with cake ingredients is something that we can all remember to do. And the good communication links to the school. Sometimes the Senko is really busy, so there might be one of the TAs who's really active, or but just knowing that communication open. But I love Jack's point about giving the child time to work things out, because actually we need our children to be problem solvers, and kind of also let us know when things aren't happening. So so this is the advice from the experts, as in the mentors. Get familiar with the school setting before the term starts. So yeah, it makes all the difference. Again, he said about the additional interests. Don't be afraid to hold teachers accountable. And I think that is really key. It's so hard. We're trying to build a relationship with a new place, but actually it is all right to say, just like Bryony had with her child not being able to access things. It's okay to say, because that's our job still, as well as the qualified teacher for the visually impaired and the other teams. We can say when they can't access the work. Yes, so to give your child space, but know when to intervene. I know that for Chloe, I don't know if anyone's been to any of the other things we've done, but when I could see she was struggling, I set up a system where she still loves squishies, and she couldn't talk about things, but I just put a pot on the table, and if she had a bad day, she put a lemon squishy in the pot, just to say, so her dad and I knew she'd had a bad day. And then if it was a good day, she had a cake. And it was just nice to know. It was hard for her to talk about, but it was nice to know. So, okay, well, thank you very much for listening.